and welcome back to a very different episode of Worn Out Racing, where I've bought a C5R Corvette Power Wheels. Now, before we start the episode, two things I want to basically mention. First up, don't forget to stop by the Worn Out Racing online shop. You can stop on there and get all of my t-shirts. There's a load of designs on there at the moment, from my long sleeve track tops with the Worn Out Racing logo. I've got a HKS inspired logo t-shirt on there as well, which I really love. Also, I've got my new certified Lemon Mechanic t-shirt, which I'm really happy with. You can pick those up on there as well. As long as some other designs, masks, there's unisex, females, kids t-shirts, the whole shebang. It's all handled by Spring, so they handle all the shipping and packaging. It does mean I have to charge a little bit more for them, I'm afraid. But otherwise, so far, top service. The quality is great, and I actually love the t-shirt. So stop on by, and you can help support the channel that way. Number two, stay to the end of the video, because at some point I'm going to be talking to you about another potential Worn Out Racing event. Now, if anybody knows, I did one September last year. I did a Worn Out Racing rolling road event called Rollers. Actually went down really well. I had quite a lot of people really interested in it. We had a decent amount of people turn up. I did quite a small one to start with, just to see how it went. And I've always said I was going to do a much bigger one after, and I've got an idea for it. I'm going to pitch that a little bit towards you at the end, and you can let me know what you think. But before I bleat on anymore, straight into the live action, and we'll go to the C5 Corvette. Anybody who follows me on Instagram will already know that I picked up this little peach and seen a few of the upgrades I had planned for it. And I'm quite honest with you, I couldn't refuse. It was just down the road. It was super cheap, and actually these are really rare in the UK. You don't really get many Power Wheels. It tends to be more of an American thing. You do just be able to buy them from Toys R Us. Anybody in the UK knows what Toys R Us is. But obviously I've never really ever seen one. So as soon as it came up, all of 10 minutes down the road, I thought I'm buying that regardless, and then I'm going to work out what to do with it. But the plan with this project, if you want to call it a project, is to have as much fun as possible. All of the previous electric cars I've ever done have been really, really small, single-seater kind of children's cars. But I will show you this in a minute. Being a Power Wheels, and you can probably judge by the size of me and the size of it behind me, it is massive. It's easily big enough for two children, and it's definitely big enough for my 6'4" frame, because I tested it out. So, disclaimer. I've already kind of built most of it, if I'm honest. I started building it. I thought I'll just share a few photos and stuff like that, see if anyone's interested. Actually, people seem to be pretty buzzing about it. Anyone who's seen it says really cool. Anyone who's seen it actually moving says it's even cooler. It surprised me so far as well with how well this has come together. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a video. And even though some of it's going to be a sort of past tense, showed you what I did, I thought you might find it interesting anyway. So let's dive straight into it. I'm going to take you around the car. It's got some really cool features, and I'm going to show you what crazy stuff I've done to it so far. And here it is in all its glory. Like I said, I don't want to throw rare around too often, but I've genuinely never seen one of these come up for sale. I should know. I look for this sort of stuff all the time. And again, the only real Power Wheels I've ever seen in this country are the Porsche 911 ones. But you can get quite a few of those, because that was probably the ones that we got in this country. It's been sat out in the sun for a long time. It's got a few quirks, and I'll be honest with you, it's been hacked around quite a lot. I think the previous person was a bit of a petrol head, so he'd already started chopping it about and stuff. So unfortunately, the working tail lights, it had a working radio, it's got a cup holder. It had sound effects, indicators, front headlights, all manner of things now don't work. Now I will probably mess around to get the lights and the headlights, maybe some underglow and stuff. We'll work about that later on. But otherwise, it is solid as a rock. Basically, not only is the front suspension all metal, so it's all metal framework, all metal steering joints and everything like that, whereas normally plastic. The previous owner, and I'll show you how I know he's done this, has ditched the original axle that goes through the plastic. And it's got this full metal rear axle on there as well. So, I mean, I could sit in this and the thing doesn't flinch. Now, one thing I will say that's really cool about this is an exact replica of the actual C5R Corvette race car. And I'm going to put a picture of that up now. And that thing is sick. So I do want to try and get this thing cool. I'm probably going to ditch all the graphics, and I'm going to respray it some sort of crazy colour. And I've got some ideas for styling that, but let's not get into that. But let's just touch on this for a second. Not only does it have a magnetic bonnet, which, you know, why is that not cool? It's got a fake LS. I mean, it's amazing. There's a cover missing there, but I've got a little plan for this anyway. But one battery goes in there, one battery goes in the other bit, but I'll show you that in a minute. But first, let's start with the upgrades. Now, if I take these seats up, because the harnesses, it's actually got seat belts are built into part of it, I will explain. Now, a lot of these tend to have two motors. A lot of the more modern ones at least have two engines, two motors in the back. Some of the cheaper ones only have one. This one's only got one. They can be between 6 and 12 volt, generally. You do get some 24 volt ones. They tend to be like off-roaders, and they've got 4 motors, stuff like that. Now, I've upgraded all of this, and I'm going to explain to you what I've done. Now, any of you who are lucky or unlucky enough to have heard of AliExpress, it's a dangerous website, because Fundamentally, it's like the Chinese eBay. So rather than paying UK prices for something that you know got built in China, and you're just paying effectively UK kind of taxes on it, you can just buy stuff directly from the Chinese companies, and all you've got to do is be a little bit patient, just be a little bit careful of reading reviews and stuff. So I go on there, I think, right, first up, I'm going to find the fastest engines that bolt into one of these, like a bolt-in engine. The wheels come like any wheel, different like PCDs, I suppose. They're like different star shapes. Found the right ones. Scrolled right away to the bottom until I found the fastest revs, 40,000 rev engines. I'll have those. Buy 2 of those. And as luck would have it, I was just perusing from other stuff because I thought I was going to have to wire this whole thing myself. And it turns out there are companies on there that sell universal wiring kits where it comes with multiple options. So you can get different pedals, different gear sticks, power steering setups, different engine sizes. Yeah. So I found another company that did 24-volt ones specifically because I wanted to beef it up. A proper speed controller, so it controls all like the power coming in and the brakes, blah blah blah. Got it with a decent pedal, got it with a decent gear stick, the whole shebang. Waited a couple of weeks, boom, it all turned up. Now, and here it is. So like I said to you, I've already done all the hard work. I will explain everything to you as we go. But like I said, it comes. I think this all came to about £70 or so, if I think, for all the controllers and stuff. That's the main controller. It comes with a charging port, so I've just left that loose for now because I'll probably end up charging just with my car charger. It does also come with this, which is effectively like a trigger. So obviously if it hits too much power, it just blows that off instead. And then you've got the 2 wires going to one motor, 2 wires going to the other motor, and then all the rest of the wires run up for the key and the gear stick and the pedal. Now, you will see this lovely little gully here runs underneath the car. I'll flip it over in a minute to show you anyway. And there's just a little panel that you pull off. And as a miracle would have it, because obviously these are all going to be completely different sizes, pretty much every single wire was the size I needed. This one was a little bit too long for the motor, and that one was a little bit too short, so I extended that one. Other than that, every other single one, I mean, even the pedal one was too long, fitted perfectly. I couldn't have really hoped for more. I mean, considering I was absolutely winging it, it came with a decent gear stick. So you've got reverse, neutral, low and high, because again, you've got the controller for it. And how I've managed to make this thing, wow, slightly more equipped, shall we say, is instead of having the normal ride-on electric motor in there, I've actually got 2 mobility scooter batteries. And I will show you that now. There you go, one of these bad boys from a previous mobility scooter project that I had. And they've got, I will get on there, they've got some decent ampage and stuff on there. Now what you can do is you can get a 24-volt battery, pretty expensive, and they're usually pretty big as well, or unless you go for like a lithium one or something. What you can do is go for 2 cheaper 12-volt batteries, and depending on how you put them together, it's depending on what kind of voltage and stuff you get. So if you put them in a circuit, so if you do it where it's plus to plus, minus to minus, and then they go off to the motors, it's still 12 volts, but you just get twice the amount of capacity. And if you do it in like a sequence, so you do plus to minus on one side and then minus to plus the other side, and it goes off to the motors, then you're effectively then doubling the voltage. So this ends up going from 12 to 24 volts just with swapping a couple of wires around. Again, I will show you that in a minute. Now what I will say is the reason I do up these little cars is because it's really simple. Like genuinely, you can have a massive amount of fun with one of these without spending a vast amount of money, without getting too deep into it. You could probably build it inside your house because it won't make a huge amount of mess. But what I will say is, don't forget, you're still messing around with electronics. So even though that battery isn't like ludicrous, you one, don't want to wire it properly because you're going to mount something. 2, you don't want to be doing stuff and then touching wires because obviously you're going to mount yourself. So just be careful. I said my exact, and obviously when you buy stuff from AliExpress or eBay or wherever you choose to get it, spec it right for what you're after and do what I did. Just get the maximum thing you possibly can. Now, for any of you that are actually interested in doing this kind of thing and you're obviously completely clueless when it comes to building these, I'm going to take you through just a few things I think is worth knowing now. You might learn a few things, you might just find it interesting. So, like I said, one thing to bear in mind is anytime you buy anything for one of these, depending on what wheels you've got, is what motors that you need. So I'm going to grab one of these just to show you. Now, would you believe that tiny little electric motor there is what moves these? Now, the only reason why that works, I mean, this is literally like an RC motor, like for mock control cars. I know that because I've taken one from a mock control car and stuck it in one before. The only thing that makes it possible is this gearbox. So obviously it reduces that down, makes life easier on the motor, yada, yada, yada. Now, you'll see this star shape here. Now, that varies, not massively. Most of them are usually, the 12-volt ones are normally this shape. Like any car wheel, there's a measurement between each of them. This one's got 6 little lugs, and there's a measurement between all of them. And again, I made sure I got the right one so that it actually fits inside the wheel and you can run it. You can get adapters, AliExpress, you can convert this to a different one. So if you've got like a 6-volt car with 6-volt wheels, you can get a 12 to 6-volt style adapter. Bear that in mind though. Right, the other thing to bear in mind is, like any electric car, real ones, RC ones, whatever, scooters, the whole shebang, the better the battery, the more expensive. Now this little tip will hopefully stop you having to worry about that. I'm going to go grab the other battery and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so what you do is, in this instance, obviously, if you were running just normal, so you've got 12-volt battery, you want to run 12 volts, you run the earth to the black like you normally would, and you run the red to the red like you normally would. But if you want to make it 24 volts, and you've got a couple of 12-volt batteries running around, what you do is you run the black, so this is from your controller, you run the black wire to the black wire of one battery, and you run the red wire from it to the red wire on the other battery. So you make sure you always go red to red, black to black, but you want one on one, one on the other. And then you get a wire to join the black and red together on the other side. And I said fundamentally what you're doing then is you kind of think of it in like a simplistic way. As that 12 volt travels through that 12 volt, it picks another 12 volt up from there and goes to the controller. Now, if you wire it the other way, where you go red to red, black to black, and then those off to the engines, all that effectively does is just takes all 12 volts from both of them and it just lasts longer. But this way, if you just say you are building this for a kid and you're not an idiot like me and just driving around on it like an insane person, you can switch between doing 12 volt, so it's sort of half the speed and they can control a little bit more. And then when you want to have a mess around, you just switch the wires over, 24 volt, full kill mode. Now, another thing you need to consider as well is obviously, one, if it's just like you're building like a 24 volt one of these, you haven't gone completely insane on the motors and you're just say letting a small kid ride it, this may not be a problem unless they hound on it for ages. But if you're like me, you're a fully grown man and you've built the fastest one you could build, and you're going to be riding around on this for a bit of a laugh, whether it's just around shows or with your kids, whatever, you have to worry about heat. Same with anything, you bulk up an engine in any car, you're going to worry about heat. Now, you'll notice with these, with everything kind of contained in there, once that seat's on, that's quite a small area. Now, thankfully, the last person actually cut this out to build some like weird sort of cog setup. Anyway, so this one's got like semi-okay airflow on it, but I am going to be changing it around a little bit. I'm going to be drilling, there's a couple of holes there, but I'm going to be drilling some holes in the back of here. And one thing I'm testing out, now you know, I haven't actually tested it yet, so don't quote me on it being amazing yet, is I found these. Now, these are RC car heat sinks. So it's an RC car heat sink. But what I've gone for is, rather than just a traditional heat sink, which, yeah, they do work, but maybe not quite so good as I need, this one comes with a couple of 5-volt cooling fans. Again, I haven't worked out how I'm going to wire these in yet. I'll suss that all out at some point so they're not just running the entire time. But what I'm probably going to have is like some sort of pipe or something coming off of there, somewhere where there's nice cold air. So that one just sucks nice cold air and blows it down that way. And then I'll just have this one maybe just blowing air down onto the coolant as well. So spoiler alert, I have already tested similar sort of setups to this, and they do get freaking hot sometimes. So we're going to see how that gets on. Definitely worthwhile. They're about £25 for a pair off eBay. So again, just bear that in mind. Just build in an allowance for a little bit of extra cooling, and don't put batteries in the same compartment. And when it comes to helpful tips, this is actually one thing that I really found useful when I was building the Turbo Cinquecento. I was doing the wiring and stuff for it. My soldering's always been a bit questionable. Most of you out there probably think, oh, I could solder, and fair enough. But unfortunately, some people out there solder like a complete mug. And unfortunately, there always seem to be people that I buy cars from because I end up sorting out loads of wiring. Now, it is a simple process. I mean, fundamentally, you just heat it up, stick solder on there. But if you want to do it properly, and people always say to you, don't blame your tools. In this case, blame them. I would say in most cases, actually, decent tools makes your job better. My way of thinking of it is a professional could probably do most jobs with any tool because they're a professional, whereas a novice can do most jobs with decent tools. Now, I would recommend, as I'm going to get down here, getting some kind of small gas-powered solderer. One, you don't have to worry about getting wires everywhere. Nothing more annoying than wires getting all in the way. Secondly, they heat up really fast. They heat up really good. And they're about 20, 30 pounds. Not a mad amount to spend, especially if you're thinking about messing one with these. If you really have to get one of these ones, get a good one. My gas one's broke. I'm using this. It's like the cheapest. It's knackered. I've had this for years. It's been my backup one. It doesn't really cut the mustard. But I'm going to take you for a really quick soldering quick tip, which has saved my life now. That's maybe a little bit extreme, but it's definitely made my soldering way better. And I don't actually feel ashamed now of people seeing it. So if you've never done soldering before, or even if you do, and it's crap, then I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, hopefully with my absolutely terrible soldering iron. Now, I'm going to come out and say I'm sure that buying quality wire is a good idea, and if you can, why not? But I've never, I'll be honest with you, I've never really noticed a huge amount of difference. I usually just try to buy one that's not completely taut, but make sure you get some of that flux core wire for your soldering iron. Get a set of these. The amount of times that I've tried going with these like manual wire strippers and you smack your flipping knuckles and you make a mess of it, get these automatic wire strippers. They grab the wire and do this and they pull it and it makes a nice long, nice strip wire on the end. You can cut with them as well. They are perfect. I think I picked these up for literally about £6. Obviously, I've already told you about the soldering iron. Now, the next thing I was going to tell you is now seemingly disappeared. I've had this thing for about 15 years. I used it the other day. Now I can't find it. Woohoo, I found it. So here it is. I think, again, I bought this from the cheapest shop ever. I don't know what it's necessarily intended for. I think it's actually for painting models. But it's got the little crocodile clips on there. They're a little bit strong, but who cares? Anyway, so like I said, get yourself a quality one of these. I'm just going to quickly strip these down and I will show you my little quick tip. My good mate Al told me once when I was doing my wiring. See how much easier is that? Nice and straight. You haven't made an absolute massive faff of it. Now you don't need to go crazy when you're stripping the end of wires for this, because obviously having them longer sometimes helps, but it can also be a bit of a pain. Now I'm going to try to get this to the camera without it freaking out. Now you would have seen people do this all kinds of ways. You'll have people twisting it like this, just trying to do it like that. You'll have people jamming it together. People go absolutely crazy. Now one of the ways, I've seen some really interesting ways of doing this actually, and I would probably say to some extent there isn't one specific way, but what you want to do is just very lightly spread those apart like that. Don't go crazy, you just need to open them just a little bit on both sides. Obviously it helps if you're putting two of the same grade wire together. Don't try and weld to a real big grade with a thin one. And then what you're going to do is fundamentally just fold these in and you'll see what I mean. So look, can you see you've got some strands poking out on one side and then some strands poking out on the other side. Then what you do, if you've done your job right, it's a little bit tricky to do it and look on the camera to see what I'm doing, is you twist one side first and then twist the other side next and then you twist them both at the same time. Don't go crazy like I said. And then if I've done what I've done, look, what you'll see then is they're kind of fairly nicely entwined. But then what that means is when you actually put the solder on there, you're not just putting solder around the outside, you're actually, the soldering is actually going to stick these threads or these strands of wire around the top of that one and those strands of wire around the top of that one. Now, what I do, thanks to my £2.50 or whatever it cost me crocodile clip thing, is to hold it in place. And now look, when you're soldering it, it barely moves. Now, top tip, something I never do, I always forget, I always kick myself afterwards. Don't be one of those dudes that wraps this with tape or insulation stuff, anything like that. We don't want that, guys and girls. We want to do this properly. So get yourself some actual heat wrap, some heat shrink, and put it on before you solder it. Because the amount of times I've soldered something and then I've had the heat shrink in my hand or over here. So just slot that on first. Try and make it not too big and get it far enough away. Because if you get it too close, as you're soldering, that will actually start to shrink because the wire actually gets hot enough. It doesn't take a huge amount. Now, my soldering iron is heated up as good as this awful thing can. So I'm going to quickly show you now and hopefully put my money where my mouth is and show you a beautiful professional solder. Now for reasons I can't figure out, my video stopped recording, so I actually already soldered it once, came back and it wasn't even doing any of it. So I'm going to try that again. Now this soldering iron doesn't tend to like doing this more than once because it gets a bit coated up and goes a bit weird. So I'll give it a stab. So I'm going to explain all that all over again. So there's no real specific art to this in that I can tell you exactly how long you need to hold your soldering iron on. It depends on the thickness of the wires and stuff like that, and obviously how hot your soldering iron gets. But what you'll fundamentally need to sort of think about is this soldering wire will mount as soon as you touch that. Okay, that doesn't mean necessarily the wire is ready to get the solder put on it. So what you're trying to do is holding this on the wire at 45-degree angle. It's about 45 degrees. Don't freak out if it's nothing like that. And then what you're doing then is you're putting the wire just on top of the soldering iron, and you're sort of what you're trying to do is build like a little puddle up on the top of the iron. And what happens is as that wire heats up nicely, it kind of soaks it in. It kind of you'll see it drawing into this actual wire. And the mistake a lot of people make, I think at least, is one, whacking too much of this on straight away. They just won't get a chance to heat it up. Also, just doing it, seeing it sort of blob onto the top and thinking, yeah, cool, that's done. But it's not particularly strong sold. You're probably going to get trouble getting heat shrink over the top of it and stuff. Right, I'm going to see if the camera's going to pick this up. It probably isn't. Yeah, but if I spin it around this way, let's see if you can see it. This may not go very well, but you'll get the point. So there you go, that 45-degree angle. And if you've got a nice hot soldering iron, this will take a lot quicker than what I'm doing it now. So let it heat up just for a minute. Don't go crazy. This is quite thick wire, but it will start to mount that eventually. And then what you do is you build a little bit up. And if my soldering iron flipping heats up enough, come on old boy, sort me out. There you go, that's getting a little bit better. What will happen is, you'll see it sort of draws in, there you look, to just try and do, what you can do is if you tip up a little bit higher, then you'll tend to build the solder up a little bit more up on the wire then, so it hasn't just all gone on the bottom. Yeah, that's drawing in quite well actually. There you go. Right, I'll stop the camera and I'll get a bit closer and I'll just show you it. There you go. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not going to focus a lot better than that, I don't think. What you can you see how it's kind of, you can see how the solder, I'll just go back a little bit, see how it's like silver through all of the threads? Now, you will see, because I'm going to turn this over, because my soldering iron is rubbish, it doesn't quite get hot, some of it still made it through to the bottom, so you're getting this blob. But if your soldering iron was good, and it wasn't rubbish, that technique will have it like that all the way through. It just soaks that solder all the way into the middle. And then now, because it's nice and smooth, you've got to put heat shrink over the top of that. Just use most people use a lighter and stuff. If you've got a heat gun, use one of them. Job's done. Your solder will be nice and strong. You've got to electrocute yourself. You won't suddenly have any random gremlins when you're wondering why all your wiring stopped working. And you'll be happy that I both told you that and you bought a decent soldering gun. Now, after all that, you might still be wondering, why the hell have you actually even built this thing? Now, I'll be honest with you, my plan with this really generally was just to do it, have a bit of a laugh with it, maybe flog it, give it to someone, I don't know. But generally, probably what's going to happen is I'm going to probably do one more episode where I make it look really cool, and that's the hope anyway. And then I'm probably just going to strap it onto whatever car that I own at the time, stick it on the roof bars, whatever. When I go to a show or a track day, either just stick it next to my car as just like a fun thing just to show it, or just drive around on it for a laugh. Most of the track days I go to, it's usually with mates and stuff. So obviously, as long as they're not absolutely massive, they can jump in it, we can have a bit of a blast. But that obviously all depends on whether it's fast enough to be fun. Because if it's slow, meh. Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, worn-out racing event. Now, I've got an idea to do an Italian-based retro car event at some point. More of a meet and greet, so slightly bigger than the last one. No sort of agenda for like a rolling road or anything like that. It'll be a chance for you to bring your cars, your friends and your family, chill out, see some cool Italian cars, meet some people that you've spoken to on the groups quite a lot, meet me. I get to see some people I haven't seen very much. I'll try and get it centrally. It's impossible really to get it anywhere that everyone can make it easily. It's going to be in the kind of southwesty area because it just makes sense to. It may well be, if I can organise it fast enough and find somewhere, I might do like an end of the kind of season finale. So basically doing it when the weather's just starting to turn, or I'm just going to wait until next year and do it. Do it at the beginning of the year when it starts to kick into kind of spring and stuff like that. We will see. Now, one of the ideas I've got, and this is what I need you to tell me, is as I've covered in this video, I like messing with these ride-on cars, and depending on how fast it ends up being, whether you decide you want to do it as well. But I had an idea that whatever event I do, if I can find a venue that's got a car park as well as the grass area or whatever, and they're up for it, and there's no insurance implications of doing it, would you be up for building your very own ride-on car with a few rules and limitations on it, either with your kids or just for you on your own or whatever, to bring it to the event for one, judge on how cool that everyone thinks it is. You might win a prize for the best one, and also do like a mini race. Set up a tiny little track just for a laugh. It'll either be the adults, so it needs to have the adults riding around in it. May even be able to do it with the adults and the kid in there or something. There'll be some insurance stuff for it. But either way, I thought it would be hilarious to see a bunch of grown men and women riding these things round on a miniature track built by me, as well as having a car meet as well. Let me know what you think. If you genuinely think you'd be up for buying one of these, doing a 24 volt conversion on it, or such forth, having a race on it, and generally having a good time at one of my next events, tell me. If not, don't worry. It doesn't matter. I'll still do it on my own anyway. But either way, thanks a lot for stopping by. I'll be going back to probably some normal viewing soon, some car stuff. Otherwise, I may even pull the retro moped back in at some point and finish that up as well. I'm just kind of going with whatever I feel like at the moment. And obviously, if you like these kind of videos, you know what to do with all the buttons you need to press, etc. So thanks for stopping by. I'll see you soon.